There is something about the first $5,000 that feels heavier than it should, almost like an invisible wall standing between you and the version of yourself who is good with money. It is not a mansion. It is not a million. It is not even enough to quit a job or change your lifestyle dramatically. And yet for so many women, it feels completely out of reach. Like no matter how hard you try, something unexpected always shows up and pulls you back to zero. The frustrating part is that $5,000 is not an outrageous number on paper, especially in the United States where a single emergency, a medical bill, a car repair, or a few months of higher expenses can easily cost that much. But when you are trying to build it from scratch, especially while paying rent or a mortgage, covering groceries, managing family expenses, and still trying to enjoy your life a little, it can feel like you are climbing a hill made of sand, where every step forward slides back just enough to make you question whether you are making any progress at all. What makes this milestone emotionally exhausting is not just the math, it is the doubt that comes with it. You start wondering if you are bad at saving, if you started too late, or if building real financial security is something other people figure out but you somehow missed. And because $5,000 is the beginning of everything, it carries more psychological weight than any number that comes after it, even though logically it should not. Before we go further, I'm curious, have you ever felt stuck trying to reach your first savings goal, whether it was $1,000, $5,000, or something else? Share it in the comments because you might be surprised how many other women are in the exact same place. The reason the first $5,000 feels so difficult is not because it is the largest milestone you will ever reach, but because it is the first time you are trying to build something that does not yet exist. When you start from zero, every dollar saved requires a decision, and every decision feels like a trade-off between today and tomorrow. You are not building on momentum. You are creating it from scratch, and that always feels slower and heavier in the beginning. At this stage, life also tends to interrupt you more than you expect. Small emergencies pop up, birthdays happen, school expenses show up, subscriptions renew, and suddenly the money you carefully set aside has to be used. This creates a frustrating cycle where it feels like you are always restarting, even though in reality you are learning how to manage money in real time. The emotional weight of starting over can make $5,000 feel much further away than it actually is. There is also a psychological shift happening that most people do not notice. Before you reach your first real savings milestone, you may still see yourself as someone who is just trying to survive financially. Saving a few $100s is one thing, but building toward $5,000 requires you to think differently about your habits, your priorities, and your long-term security. That internal shift can feel uncomfortable because it challenges the identity you have carried for years. And finally, the early phase lacks visible rewards. When your balance is small, growth feels slow, and progress is not dramatic enough to feel exciting. You might save for months and still feel like the number is not moving fast enough, which can be discouraging. But this slow, almost boring phase is actually the foundation, because once you cross that first meaningful milestone, everything about how you see money begins to change. When you finally reach $5,000, something shifts, and it is not just the number in your account, it is the way you breathe. For the first time, you realize that an unexpected expense no longer means instant panic, because you have proof that you can handle something without going into debt. That sense of stability may seem small from the outside, but internally it feels like solid ground under your feet. $5,000 is often the point where money stops feeling completely fragile. Before that, every setback feels dramatic, but after you cross that line, you begin to understand that you can rebuild if you need to. The fear of one bad month starts to lose some of its power, and that alone changes how you make decisions. You become slightly calmer, slightly more patient, and less reactive when life happens. There is also a confidence boost that most people underestimate. Hitting your first real savings milestone proves that you are capable of setting a goal and following through, even when it was uncomfortable. That confidence spills into other areas of your financial life, whether it is negotiating your salary, investing for the first time, or saying no to expenses that do not align with your priorities. The number itself matters, but the belief you build matters even more. And perhaps most importantly, $5,000 becomes a base. Instead of building from zero every time, you are now building from a foundation. Growth feels different when you are adding to something that already exists because progress becomes visible faster. That is why this milestone changes everything, not because it solves all your financial problems, but because it marks the moment when you stop feeling stuck and start feeling capable. After you reach $5,000, progress often starts to feel different, not because life suddenly becomes easier, but because you are no longer fighting against zero. When you were starting out, every dollar saved felt like it had to work extra hard just to create stability. But once that base exists, new savings begin to stack on top of something solid, and that makes growth more visible and more motivating. At this stage, many women notice that their mindset shifts from defense to strategy. In the beginning, the goal was simply to stop feeling behind or unprepared, but after building that first cushion, you can start thinking about what you actually want your money to do. Whether it is investing, paying off debt faster, building a larger emergency fund, or saving for a home, the conversation changes from survival to direction, and that shift alone creates momentum. There is also a practical reason growth accelerates, which has to do with behavior. Once you have proven to yourself that you can save consistently, it becomes easier to continue. The habits are already in place, the systems are already working, and the emotional resistance is lower. Saving no longer feels like a punishment. It starts to feel like progress, and that emotional difference makes consistency much easier to maintain. Over time, that consistency compounds in more ways than one. Your money may begin earning interest or investment returns, but even beyond that, your discipline compounds. You become quicker at adjusting your budget, more intentional with spending, and more confident in financial decisions. That is why the first $5,000 feels so heavy, because it carries the weight of starting. And once you move past it, you are no longer pushing the entire journey uphill. In real life, reaching $5,000 does not look dramatic from the outside, but internally it can feel like a turning point. It is the moment when you stop telling yourself, "I'm just bad with money," and start realizing that you are actually someone who can build stability. That shift in identity is subtle but powerful, because once you see yourself differently, your decisions begin to follow that new belief. Instead of reacting emotionally to every expense, you start pausing and thinking long-term. You feel less pressure to impress, less urgency to keep up, and more clarity about what truly matters to you. That clarity makes it easier to say no when something does not align with your goals, and easier to stay consistent when progress feels slow. The number in your account matters, but the calm that comes with it matters even more. For many women, this milestone represents independence, not in a dramatic sense, but in a steady, grounded way. It is knowing that if something unexpected happens, you have options. It is knowing that you are not one small crisis away from starting over. And that sense of control builds confidence that reaches beyond money, because financial stability often influences how you show up in your career, your relationships, and your long-term plans. That is why the first $5,000 feels impossible in the beginning, because it is not just about saving money, it is about becoming someone new. Once you cross that line, you are no longer trying to prove that change is possible. You are living proof that it is. And from that point forward, every next goal is no longer about escaping zero, but about expanding from a foundation you built yourself. If this made you look at your first $5,000 differently, take a second to like the video and subscribe for more simple, real-life conversations about money. And in the comments, tell me what milestone you're working toward right now, because saying it out loud is often the first step to actually reaching it.